They were 250. I did the same thing with NATO. I got them to pay up. NATO was busted until I came along. I said, everybody's going to pay. They said, well, if we don't pay, are you still going to protect us? I said, absolutely not. They couldn't believe the answer.
There's so much here. Trump's unhinged outburst in South Carolina sounds like the warblings of a deeply damaged sociopath, because that's exactly what it is. And we'll get to Biden hammering him and his response in just a moment. But first, a little bit of what Trump said. Let's start with his comments about Russia.
And I said, you got to pay up. They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Okay, I know it's hard to follow his logic because he's a mentally ill, again, narcissistic sociopath. But the reason we have NATO and the reason we protect NATO is these are our allies who share our democratic principles. And, you know, without protection, Russia would run right through and invade these countries. Maybe you remember the 60s and 70s. Yeah, well, this would be a lot worse. Russia is run by a former KGB who kills political opponents and has ripped off his own country to the tune of tens of billions of dollars and interfered with the 2016 election, successfully creating a social campaign and hacking that helped Trump win.
The Russia hoax is finally dead. The collusion delusion is over.
No, it's not a hoax. Every one of our intelligence agencies, all 17 of them, recognized the attack on our democracy, and they chronicled it. It's there to read. If you listen to Trump, you think it didn't happen. If you listen to the real world, you'll see it was all true. And Trump's long history with Putin is well documented.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Honestly, this one statement alone would have destroyed any other Republican in my lifetime. Supporting a Russian mass murderer over NATO allies and saying out loud that if they attack, we'll do nothing? Seriously, don't you think that's incentive for Russia to further interfere with our democratic process?
That war is a disaster. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed, far more than you're reading about. And you notice you don't hear about that war anymore. You know why? Because they're not doing well, that's why. Because the fake news is totally bought in, and now they're saying this is not working out. No, we got to get that war settled, and I'll get it settled. It would have never happened with Putin. It would have never happened. And by the way, it didn't happen for 4 years. It didn't happen. We'll get it settled.
And then there's Ukraine, a free and sovereign Western-themed country invaded by Putin, who has fought bravely for their freedom against a superpower.
As an example, let's say we give all this money. We were already into Ukraine for over $200 billion. And they could make a deal with Russia in the next 3 weeks, and all of a sudden they don't want to deal with us anymore. We've given hundreds of billions of dollars. And
see, but Trump lies about the money. It's not 200 billion. It's more like 80 billion. Still, the message to Russia is clear. If Trump wins, Ukraine is yours.
So we're at 200 plus, and it affects them much more. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? It affects them much more.
And Trump demanding that they pay up. Seriously, this putz who owes money to everyone in New York City, from contractors back in the 80s to taxes from the last 50 years to his own miserable attorney who is collapsing under the weight of his own pitiful existence.
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
Telling NATO they must pay up? Here's the deal. If NATO collapses, our military budget will, and this is a Brookings Institute estimate, rise to $3 to $4 trillion a year. So we could spend 80 billion here and protect democracy, or 50 times that. By the way, Trump's corporate tax cuts, cutting their rate from 35% to 21% and costing Americans about $1.5 trillion from every year since 2018, they would have easily paid for these bills to keep the world safe.
So we're at 200 plus, and it affects them much more. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? It affects them much more.
And of course, that's BS. Mark Twain once said the best defense for the United States were the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. However, nukes ended that. That no longer exists. We cannot afford to be isolationist. 9/11 proved that.
Hello.
Even Nikki Haley, who has her own brand of Republican crazy, stood up to Trump's craven insanity.
My husband's a combat veteran. He deployed in Afghanistan. The last thing we want is our loved ones to go to war. And I look at what Donald Trump said on Saturday, and it made me sick to my stomach. He said that NATO, that if any of those countries aren't paying their fair share, that not only would he not defend them, but that he would encourage Putin to take over them. Putin kills his opponents. Putin currently has arrested Evan Gersovich, who's a reporter, just for journalism. This guy's a thug. He invaded a pro-American, freedom-loving country with Ukraine. 500,000 people have died and been wounded because of Putin. And you're going to side with that? NATO has been a success story. For 75 years, we haven't had a war in that region because it's an alliance that scares Russia. Russia has never invaded a NATO country. They invaded Georgia, they invaded Ukraine, they invaded Moldova, all non-NATO countries. They are scared of the alliance. He just put every military member at risk and every one of our allies at risk just by saying something at a rally like that. That's the danger. And then he goes and mocks my husband's military service.
Where's her husband? Oh, he's away. He's away. What happened to her husband? What happened to her husband? Where is he? He's gone.
I need to start with the fact that Donald Trump had a rally today. And in that rally, he mocked my husband's military service. Donald, if you have something to say, don't say it behind my back. Get on a debate stage and say it to my face.
There are some conservatives, however, who understand the threat that Russia poses, and they find Trump's comments obscene.
This comment over the weekend is not a one-off. It is consistent with what Donald Trump has been saying for years, what he has been signaling for years. And the rest of the world is listening to this. And you know, the way to start wars, of course, is to have miscalculations. And he is signaling weakness. He is signaling appeasement. He is signaling surrender.
All right, I promised Joe Biden's response, and we'll get to that in just one second. But we have all grown weary from Trump's idiotic tirades. But we need to make the world aware of what he's saying and what it means right now. And by the world, I mean every hillbilly in every red state waving an American flag. They need to know who this guy is. And the media is dropping the ball.
Given all of the things that have happened this week, including, and I know you asked Chris Christie about this, the fact that Donald Trump yesterday suggested that Vladimir Putin should have free rein in attacking NATO allies. Yeah. And what do we see when we wake up this morning? Wall-to-wall coverage of whether a guy who's 4 years older than his opponent is too old to be president.
That's former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki telling the truth. I mean, has there ever been a more obvious difference between the two? One is a supporter of human rights and freedom through democracy, and the other is willing to sacrifice lives and freedom to keep money in his pocket and stay out of jail. And speaking of Biden, here is his response to Trump's ridiculous and dangerous, unhinged remarks. Under my administration, the United States of America has stood shoulder to shoulder with our allies to build a NATO alliance that is bigger and stronger than ever and stands in defense of democracy against Vladimir Putin's authoritarian aggression. If my opponent, Donald Trump, is able to regain power, he's making it clear. He's making it clear as day that he will abandon our NATO allies if Russia attacks him and allow Russia to do whatever the hell they want. I grew up in the 80s under the threat of nuclear war, and I saw Reagan, a Republican who I never voted for, stand up to Russia and make us all, even Democrats, proud of our country's part in the fall of the USSR. I've been doing talk radio since '92, and I've seen a lot. But this guy, he really could begin the end of the world unless we stop him. So follow Really American right here as we strive to bring you the truth about Trump and his cult. Subscribe, like, and hit notifications. For Really American Media, I'm Chip Franklin.